How does abortion help the left gain and keep political power? Well, let's say that abortion were made illegal tomorrow. Then what would happen is women would then start to face enormous risks for having sex. Well, having, procreative, penis, vagina, ejaculate, sperm, egg, sex, right? Well, that is very interesting. How does easy sexual access, consequence-free sexual access, serve the left? It's very interesting to think about. Okay, so suddenly women are going to have to really think twice about who they sleep with because could get pregnant, right? Now, suddenly, marriage becomes much more valuable because if a woman is willing to have sex with you in a committed relationship like marriage, but she's not willing to have sex with you outside of a committed relationship because she doesn't want to take the risk of getting pregnant and the dangers associated with that, if abortion isn't free, easy, and subsidized by the taxpayers, most of whom hate it, okay, so suddenly marriage, committed relationships becomes a lot more valuable. Suddenly, women have to start looking for moral qualities in a man, right? Because if you want to have sex, as young people and middle-aged people and old people do, but young people in particular, if you want to have sex, then you have to, well, it's much safer to do so in a marital relationship. So then you have to start thinking about who you're going to have sex with, who is actually attractive to you, and the standards for a woman who wants to become a wife are very different. In fact, quite opposite than the standards of a woman who just wants to sleep around and have fun and, get that 1,000 penis stare after 10 years, right? So then you sort of work it through and you say, okay, so if abortion is illegal, then men get access to sex through a committed relationship like a marriage. That is a big change. To access sex, you need to get a woman to marry you. To get a woman to marry you, you need to be productive. You need to have, like a job. You need to have some savings. You might need to have a car. You need to come from a decent family, hopefully, or at least have a good deal of self-knowledge. All of these kinds of things you need. So, what happens then? Well, young men and young women begin to think of family and children because there's no legal abortion. So they want to have intercourse, and the way they do it is to get married. Now, you get married, you don't mess around, right? You get a job, you get a little condo or an apartment somewhere, and you then start to think about having kids. Now, if the woman is thinking about having kids, now birth control, fine, right? But just not this ex post facto birth control, retroactive birth control of abortion. But it's sort of on your mind. So men and women will get married younger. Now, if men and women get married younger, what happens to the tax base? Well, of course, if you get married younger, there is a good deal of possibility, once you're in a stable relationship, that the woman doesn't feel quite as compelled to go out and get a job. She starts to think about having children younger rather than older, right? Because I've heard from a lot of women, they say, well, I need to have a career because I just can't rely on a man. Well, what if you choose a man who's reliable and you get committed and you get into a relationship like a marriage? Well, then do you really feel as much need to go have your own independent life and all that? So then you start to have kids younger, which means that there will be more children being born. More children being born means that, well, there's less of a tax base, right? Because women are raising children rather than out there working. With less of a tax base, there's less capacity to redistribute income, which is what the left and a lot of the red Republicans want to do as well. So you have a lot of kids, suddenly the government has to create a bunch of, they have to have a lot of medical resources available because kids consume medical resources. They have to get a whole bunch of schools up and running because there'll be a lot more kids. Like if there's a baby boom, the entire socialist decay system falls apart. Right? So a baby boom is like the worst thing that you want if you're like a leftist. If you want your civilization to continue, a baby boom is a pretty good thing. But if you want to just have raw, naked political power, a baby boom is bad because it costs the government money and lowers its income at the same time. So you'd actually have to make some difficult and rational decisions when it came to your government and its spending and all that kind of stuff. So that's really, really bad. Whereas, of course, if there's abortion, women can fool around, they can sleep around, they can date around, they can push off into virtual infinity having kids, which means that, well, a good chunk of them won't have kids. And those who do may have one or two children and will probably keep working at the same time. So the abortion thing is a very, very important keystone in the arch of continuing the massive rise of government power. Also, you see, if women get married, and in particular then if they have children when they're relatively young, what happens is, and this is very clear from the data, is that if women are in a committed relationship and dependent upon a man for their resources, for themselves, for their children, then they want lower taxes, of course, because higher taxes take away resources from their families, right? I mean, if you're a single mom and you have no husband, taxes can go through the roof for all you care. You're not paying any, usually, if you're on welfare, which a lot of them are. You're not paying any taxes, and taxes going up means that there's more money for the government to give resources to you. But if you're a married woman and you're reliant upon your husband's income, then if taxes go up, there's fewer resources available for your family, which is why married women tend to vote for smaller government and unmarried women tend to vote for larger government. So that is pretty tough for the left. Your tax base is going down, your costs are going up, and you've got a lot more people who are voting for smaller government and smaller taxes, which means that you have less crack to shoot into your veins and underneath your toenails and redistribute to all of your friends. So it's really important to understand just what a central part of collectivism, of the left's plan, I guess you could say, for the world, which is basically just to eat it until we all expire. The abortion question is very powerful, and the reason why they consider it so unambiguous, like the mother's needs 100%, the fetus's life 0%, is because the moment it becomes a complicated question, they fear that society may end up recognizing the right to life of the unborn child, banning abortion, and that changes the entire sexual dynamic of the West. Suddenly a woman becomes very valuable for not having sex, for holding off until marriage. Whereas right now, women are, kind of handing it out to some degree like candy on Halloween, and that destabilizes everything. And when people live these chaotic lives of sexual hedonism and so on, it's often associated with drinking, it's often associated sometimes with drug use, it's associated with just general irresponsibility as a whole. And when people's lives get chaotic, they have a pretty desperate need for the government to give them structure, for the government to give them housing and health care and retirement savings and all that, because their lives are very chaotic. I've known some people like this, and they are just crazy entropic forces of nature. And so if you can get people to postpone being responsible, if you can get them to just kind of sleep around and drink and do drugs or just gain weight and not be healthy, and you see these half-soused British girls staggering their way along on a Thursday night, and it's like, oh, these are really, really chaotic lives. And you can live with that chaos to some degree, but it means that you will become dependent upon the government, because everything that we consume in the present is something that we're probably going to need in the future. And I guess if you've known people, and let me know in the comments below, like if you've known people who have this kind of chaos in their life, whose lives are just random and disorganized and wild and dangerous and irresponsible, well, the government kind of likes that. The government likes promoting chaos and demoting or attacking stability, which is why, the leftists always love the 60s and hate the 50s, like with a burning passion. I remember in a feminist course I took in college reading the book Homeward Bound about how terrible it was to be a woman in the 50s, which, let's just say, it may be more debatable than the leftists claim. But it is a very central issue on the left. They do get quite panicked about it. It's not because they care. It's not because they love women's freedoms. It's not because they love anyone's freedoms. They don't. What they do love is that which disintegrates stability, and that which causes chaos, and that which creates dependence. Because, as we all know, if they have that, they have a virtually unlimited supply of the drug they so desperately crave, called power.